Hi friends, it's Lisa Hetrick, illustrator for Gina K Designs, and I'm so grateful you could join me today. I have a super fun watercolor card that we're going to do today, and we're going to mix it up with some fun new products that I'm going to share. But we are going to modify this design from this 6x6 card down to an A2 sized card. And it's going to be lots of fun, and it's going to be a wet on wet watercolor technique that we're going to cover, and also a bit of a no line watercoloring. And we're using my new stamp set, Your Wings, to create this patterned butterfly image on the watercolor paper to create the card. So we're modifying the 6x6 card down to a smaller size to create the card. Okay, so I'm using this brand new paper from Arteza. It comes in a watercolor pad. It is their expert line of 100% cotton watercolor paper. I've been using this paper for a couple months, and I'm really liking it for my watercolor paper crafting projects. As you know, if you've watched my channel for a while, I generally use the B Paper Company paper, and it's my super fave for paper crafting. And the reason why is because it's 100% cotton. So here's the B Paper Company paper that I'm always talking about, that I really enjoy for paper crafting. It's 100% cotton. And this paper from Arteza is also 100% cotton. So that was very intriguing to me, and I wanted to give it a go. So I've been playing with it for a few months, doing some paintings like this one, and also doing a lot of paper crafting projects using this watercolor paper because I'm pretty picky about my watercolor paper. If you want to get good results with your watercolor, especially wet on wet techniques that I'm going to be doing today, you really need a good 100% cotton watercolor paper. So I'm going to dive right into the supplies. I'm using the Gina K Designs Amalgam ink skeleton leaves, and I'm also using my new stamp set with Gina K Designs, the Your Wings stamp set. I'm going to be focusing on using the actual wings for the no line watercoloring. I'm not going to be using the body of the butterfly. We're really going to be using the wings and pulling them together for this no line project. I'm also going to be using this sentiment, You Inspire Me, because I really like that sentiment. I think it's really positive, from the new Gina K stamp set as well. And I've got two amalgam inks here that I wasn't sure what I was going to use at first. So I had grabbed Whisper and Skeleton Leaves. And Whisper would have been a really lighter gray to use, which would have been great. But I decided to use Skeleton Leaves because on watercolor paper, Skeleton Leaves will leave a little bit of its color, and it'll create a little bit of an outline with this wet on wet technique. So I've got some white mediums here. I've got a Uniball Signo pen. I have some gouache from Arteza, and I also have some white Nuvo drops because at the end I'm going to be doing some splattering. I have my tidy towel here, and I have my just a jar of water for the watercoloring, and I have the Gina K Designs Connect glue because I really enjoy using this glue for watercolor projects. It really sticks well. Okay. I've got some silver black velvet brushes because they're a very thirsty brush, and they're going to be great for this wet on wet technique. You can use any kind of watercolor brush you want, even a water brush would be fine. Okay, I'm also going to be using these two products from Arteza. These are the 48 Real brush pens. Now, you've seen me use brush pens from Arteza in many videos on my channel, and I will link them up and show you. So I'm a fan of these pens. They've got a great color range. They're great for watercolor techniques, and I've showed them on watercolor paper and Bristol paper. I really enjoy going direct to paper on Bristol paper with these pens, but I also enjoy using them as a watercolor medium, and I'm going to be using them today as a watercolor medium for our project. So I'm going to grab a few colors here in the pink and the purple range. I'm not really sure. I really want to have this butterfly kind of have like kind of a unicorn color feel. So I've just grabbed these three colors to use for this project. I enjoy these brush pens. I think that the colors are vibrant, and I'm really going to be using them to add a little bit of extra texture and dimension into our wet on wet watercolor. It's no secret that I am a huge fan of watercolor art supplies. I use them in almost every video, so no big secret here. But this 36 pan set from Arteza is a really, really nice student grade watercolor set at a really nice price point, and I've shared this set before in some past videos, and I'm going to use it again today. It's a really, really nice set. It comes in a nice metal watercolor tin that's typical for a lot of other watercolor sets. I did open up the set and rearrange everything in kind of the color order that I liked. I have a free swatch download for you that you can click on the link in the notes. If you have this set or you're interested in getting this set, you have an opportunity to download the swatch so that you can swatch your colors out. This set has a lot of mixing space in the pan, and I've shared this in some past videos. You can see that I have been using this for a little while, and I really do enjoy using it. I think it's a great watercolor set for paper crafting. It comes with this really nice water brush. It makes it pretty easy to travel with. Watercolor pan sets are a great way to get started in watercolor because you get a lot of different colors that you can experiment with and color mix with, usually at a really good price point. There are 36 colors in this set, so there is quite a bit of value built into the set. And what I really, really like is that they do re-wet very quickly, so they're not dry and crumbly. So I've just spritzed them and they're ready to go. And you can see that this color, this violet color, is really very vibrant. There's a bit of granulation in the color, which gives you a little bit of texture, which is kind of nice for our paper crafting projects. And I just think that it's a really great value set and a really great introduction to watercolor. Perfect for paper crafters, especially when you're new to watercolor and you're starting to learn techniques and you really want to experiment first before you start to amass a lot of supplies. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about using brush pens to direct to paper. So I've got a piece of Gina K cardstock here, and I've taken the brush pen and I've just kind of drawn out a little bit of color on to the paper. And I've just got a little bit of water here to see if I can make that color move. And you can see that it's really not moving. If you want to use a direct to paper technique with the brush pens, Bristol paper is the way to go. And I'll link up a video that I've done that shows that technique right here. So I've also taken the brush pens down and direct to paper onto some watercolor paper. And you can see that this 100% watercolor paper is letting me move that color a little bit. So I'm able to break down that pigment so I don't have all that texture that is seeping into the crevices of the watercolor paper from the brush pen like it would on the regular paper. So I'm able to move it a little bit more. One of my favorite ways to use brush pens is to put some of the color down onto my mat and use it as a watercolor medium. These Arteza brush pens are very vibrant and rich in color, and they can be used as a really nice watercolor medium when you use them this way. So you can see that the color is very smooth and it's vibrant, and when I compare it to the pan set, it makes a really nice color medium to use together. So you can get some really nice lights and darks when you use the pan set, which is kind of super duper full strength, and you use the brush pens when you can get some lighter tones of color. So they're really fun products to use together. So now I'm going to move on to the wet and wet technique for today's project. So I've taken my brush and I have wet the entire paper. It is saturated, and I've kind of just concentrated my water in the butterfly stamp areas. And I've gone into the violet color in the pan set, and you can see that I'm dropping that color in the water and letting it do its thing. I'm just kind of coaxing it a little bit into the wings. And the wet and wet technique may feel uncomfortable to you at first because it is a hot mess when you begin. But I promise when we get to the end, you're going to love the effects that you get. And the key with the wet on wet technique, and I've done this in a couple other videos, is let the water do its thing. Watercolor wants to flow where the water is. So it's a go with the flow kind of thing. Now, in between each layer of color, I am just drying it with my heat tool. You could just let it dry and come back to it. But I want to keep moving on. So I've got a really light wash of the violet color in here. And there's a couple little drops that are a little more intense in the areas. But I've got a light wash of color. So I've gone in with my light. And now I'm going to my darker color, which what I would call my shadow color. And the paper is dry, my brush is wet, and I'm coaxing the color around the wings very, very gently. So I've got the concentration of the color in the center portion of the butterfly wings, and I am coaxing it out to the outer edges very, very gently with water on my brush, just a little bit of water on my brush, and just working on a wet on dry. So my brush is wet and my paper is dry. And you can see that I did a little bit of outlining here, and I'm taking that color and coaxing it back into the center. So we get some variation of color. We get some darker shadow tones in the center of the butterfly. It gives it some really nice contrast. And then we're pushing that color out to the outer edges. So the outer wings are a little bit lighter and maybe a little bit more transparent, like a winged butterfly would be. So this is kind of fun. So first we started with the wet on wet to just get down that first wash of washy washy color, and then dried it, and then moved into the second layer of watercolor, which is more of a wet on dry. The paper is dry, the brush is wet, and I'm moving the color around that way. So now I'm going to go ahead and dry this, and you can start to see the shape is coming together for the card and for the butterfly, and you can see that that skeleton leaves color is still showing up, and I really like it because when you mix watercolor with skeleton leaves, it just creates a little bit of extra texture and dimension. So I just swatched out a little bit of the pink color from the pan set, and I'm going to use this on the outer edges of the butterfly wings, but I'm going to just, again, do that wet on dry and let these two colors mix together. So going in for another layer, and this is called glazing, or layering is an easy way to say it. When you're building up your color from a light wash to another, a little bit of a darker wash, and then adding more washes of color on top, and you're glazing these colors on top of each other. And what's happening is the colors underneath, because watercolor is so transparent, they will show through. So it's not opaque at all. Like if you would use acrylic paint or gouache, you wouldn't be able to see some of the texture and dimension and the glaze of the layers underneath. With watercolor, because it's a transparent medium, you are able to see the colors underneath, and you get some really neat effects. I love it. Okay, so I'm just going around all of the butterfly wings, and again, this is a wet brush on dry paper, and I'm dropping color in areas, and it looks kind of scary because I'm just dropping big globs of color, but then I'm blending it together and just mixing them and doing little dots of color here and there and letting the water and the watercolor just mix together. So this isn't a real smoothie blend like you would get with like Copic markers. With watercolor, we're letting the two colors come together and blend together, and where they meet, they create another color, and they give you this really, really nice fun effects. So this is a really simple way to watercolor your stamped images and kind of be a little bit less precise like you would with another medium. So you can see that I'm mixing the violet and the pink together, and where they mix in the middle, I'm just kind of adding a little bit more color. And also, one other thing I want to note about watercolor is it looks really intense and vibrant here. And I'm on my third layer of watercolor here. But when it dries, it is going to fade back a little bit. So that technique of glazing and layering and building up color helps you create more vibrancy over time. So that's why I've got like 3 layers going here. Okay, so I've grabbed the Arteza brushes because I'm going to work on some of these other butterflies, and I want to use this color. It's pretty intense, but it's also less vibrant than the pan sets. Now, if you only have pan sets to work with, you could water your color down. So the more water you add to your color, you're breaking the pigment in the watercolor down, and you can get values of color that are softer, and you can do it with one kind of medium. But I like to mix the two together. So you can see that I'm just dropping in some of this brush pen color and creating just a little bit of extra texture and dimension. These two mediums work really well. So if you have a brush pen set and you have a pan set, you can use them together. You can see that I'm just doing these little texture drops here, which is kind of fun. When they dry, it's going to add a little extra texture and dimension to the butterfly. I've taken this Arteza brush pen and just applied some of it to my craft mat here. And I'm going in with a little bit of water, and I'm going to do this butterfly from the outer edges with the brush pen so that you can see that this is a nice softer way to apply color. It's less intense than the pan set, which has a lot more pigment in it. I'm doing a little bit of direct to paper here, not really loving the way that's turning out. When you use your brush pens, you really do need to use them, and your direct to paper, you really do need to use them on dry paper. I used it right here in the middle. I was trying to get a little bit of color in the center of those wings, and it was wet, so it doesn't really work very well. So you can see that I'm going back and forth from the brush pen to the pan set, and I'm just dropping in color. A little bit here, a little bit there, but using this same color palette, and it's coming together really, really nicely. So I've got a little bit of this brush pen color that I'm just going to add to the outer wings. And I'm really digging it. I love the way these two mediums work really well together. You can just use them to dot some color in, or you can use it to paint your entire project with. And again, I'll link up the video where I've used these brush pens on Bristol paper so that you can really, really see how vibrant these colors can be, especially with embossed images. Okay, so right now I'm blurring out the edges. So my brush is super, super wet, and all of the colors are moving. So I'm going around the edges of my stamped image, and I'm just coaxing those edges and that color to come out a little bit and to create this really, really soft edge effect. I've got a little sponge here, and I'm just kind of dabbing it around the edges to create a little bit more extra texture. One of the ways that you can create a softer edge around your stamped images is to just add a little bit water to the watercolor and let it flow out. So this is how we get that really nice kind of washy-washy, dreamy kind of feel to it. Okay, so now it's dry, and we put about 3 to 4 different layers between the pan set and the brush pens on this watercolor piece. And you can see that some of the color has faded back, but it's still very, very vibrant. And I'm really, really digging the color. I love how soft the edges are. You can see how the design's been modified from that 6x6 card down to that A2 size card. We get a lot of whimsical little pattern butterfly going on here. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a close-up here, and you can see the skeleton leaves color is still there, but I'm loving it. And you can see some of the texture and the granulation in the watercolor. So this is a really nice pan set to use for your watercolor paper crafting projects. I would really highly recommend it. And I've been enjoying it for several years now, and I really like using it. Okay, so I've taken some Connect glue and I have attached my watercolor piece to an A2 sized card using Gina K heavyweight cardstock. And right now I just took a little bit of gouache paint, a little bit of white gouache. You could use any kind of white color medium, and just kind of did my splash of color. So just getting a little bit of splashy dots down onto the card before I put the sentiment in. So I pulled the You Inspire Me sentiment, and I'm going to grab my Misty here because on watercolor paper with black ink, you usually need to stamp down 2 to 3 times, even with the amalgam ink, so that I can get a really, really deep, rich impression. So I've got my little Misty here. It's a little bit dirty. I haven't quite cleaned it yet. And I'm going to position that You Inspire Me sentiment right down into that area right between the two butterflies. So I'm inking it up with the amalgam ink, and I'm going to stamp it down once and take a peek. Okay, looking good. I'm going to go ahead and stamp it down twice, and see how it just gets richer in its color each time. When you're stamping onto watercolor paper, that watercolor paper wants to suck in that ink. So just by stamping it twice, you're able to get a much crisper impression of your sentiment. Okay, so now I just grabbed some white Nuvo drops and I'm adding a little bit more what I want to call controlled splatter, right? So I'm just intentionally putting some more white dots in a couple different areas on the card, just adding a little bit more texture and dimension to the card. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I usually make the stamps the star of the show, so I don't add a lot of additional layers. Sometimes I'll add a jewel or a little bit here and there, but I really do love to do the splatter technique with watercolor because it just adds a little bit extra texture and dimension to it. So I'm really loving the way this card has come out. And it's been a lot of fun walking you through the wet on wet technique for watercolor. It's a really simple, messy technique, but a lot of fun. And just using the wings from the Your Wings stamp set, you created this really simple, really beautiful card. And the colors are just so vibrant. So here's the original that was a 6x6 card, which you could frame. And it's really easy to modify this design down to an A2 size card to create that whimsy and that flying butterfly kind of look. So I'm really, really digging it. I hope you enjoyed today's card tutorial. Thanks so much for joining me. Please consider sharing the joy by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.